Welcome to our podcast. This is Friends on Fire.
I'm Mike. I'm a lifelong devotee of financial independence. I even wrote a book about it.
And I'm Maggie, a newer convert, but just as passionate, especially on the intersection of minimalism and financial independence.
We're one and the same.
We are two like-minded friends who believe that talking about money with your friends and family opens the door to financial well-being.
The Friends on Fire podcast is about dispelling myths, building financial acumen, and sharing your financial independence journey with the people you care about.
This is Friends on Fire.
Hey, Mike.
Hey, Maggie.
How's it going?
Going well. I'm interested in this topic today.
I wanted to know, I'm going to just jump right in, okay?
Okay, do it.
When was the last time you took someone on a date that you're not married to, I mean? Like, when was the last time you were dating?
So, last time I went on a date with someone who I was dating and not married to.
Yes.
Okay.
No, but not, I just mean not your wife, not Britta, like pre-Britta, pre-meeting your wife and marrying her. Like,
but I also went on dates with her before we were married.
I know,
right?
I'm not, can't.
So
yeah,
I need to like,
that.
so like the person before Britta I need to be talking about? Let me just talk about my current wife.
You dated Britta. You can
yeah,
talk about
so
her.
This would have been, I mean, we were married in 2011 and we were together for 3 years before then. And so I think like when we think about dating,
a lot of context, Mike. I just wanted to know, like, it's been like 10 years.
I am unsure about the purpose of this question, but it would have been probably like 13 years ago.
Okay, it's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a long time.
The preface of the reason I was asking you that is, we're going to talk about how to save money while dating. Ironically, it's been a while since Mike or myself have been in the quote, like, dating scene.
Oh, I can't even tell you what a date is anymore.
Yeah. And I'm remarried. So I did spend some time, as more of an adult, redating. But that's even been,
redating.
Redating.
Like that term.
Like re-entering the dating world. That's even been like, I don't know, 7 years ago. So Valentine's Day is around the corner, which not that really matters because people are dating year round. It just made me think that is a time when we often, seasonally talk about things like this more often. And we thought we'd cover this topic, and I'll tell you what inspired this topic, because you might wonder, why are we talking about this? Because, again, we're not in the dating scene and have not been for a while. So this episode was inspired by my neighbor. He is a single divorced dad, an awesome guy. He's actually dating someone now, but a few months ago, he was back in the dating scene. We hang out a good bit. And we went through a phase of time where he had recently broken up with his girlfriend and was starting to get back into the dating scene. And he was like, we were talking a lot about it. And he knows about this podcast, and we talk about money a decent amount. And I was shocked by how expensive he was telling me about, like, the cost of some of these dates that turned out to go nowhere. And kind of like we were just, exchanging stories. And I was just shocked by it. And so it inspired this episode because I realized, like, the dating process is really expensive, especially stereotypically for guys often. And we'll talk about same-sex dating also, because I'm not as well versed in that space and kind of the etiquette, but I have done some research through asking people and, through Google, mostly through asking people. But I'll say, like, there's some people that kind of, like, in this case, I was talking to him and I was like, dude, you are getting the shaft in this situation. Like, the amount that you are being expected to spend on people just to get to know them, to realize that there is absolutely no chemistry and no fit here, is ridiculous. And so I was just in my own mind thinking, like, I want to talk about how you can save money on dating. And I think, this applies to people. Well, as we talk through this discussion, some of this will apply to everybody that's in a relationship of any sort, whether you are, have been married for a long time. I think there's some ideas you can take from this of how you can still, like, keep things fresh, go on dates, but not break the bank. And then it also extra applies to people who are in the dating scene and actively dating, because I think there's just a lot applicable, regardless of kind of what life stage you're in. And like I said earlier, right, Mike and I are both heterosexual. So some of the references we're going to make are to our experiences in some of the kind of etiquette around men and women dating. But there's a ton of kind of different expectations and that we're just less versed on. So we're going to do our best to talk about all of the different dating situations and kind of options that are out there. And again, I've done a little bit of research on asking some friends what the etiquette is in same-sex relationships and just in different situations. And so I think it's good to start a little bit of this, Mike, with just a little bit of etiquette on like who's even supposed to pay for things. And then we'll dig into some very tactical and helpful kind of thoughts and tips on how to save money while dating and just some of the different considerations in the dynamics of who's paying and what happens financially when you're starting to date and in different relationships.
You know what? I'm just going to have so many caveats to all my answers because as you were talking through this, I'm realizing that like my experience dating was when I was much younger. The expectations, the things that we were interested at the time, the cost of doing things, it's just like totally different than it is now. But generally speaking, when I was dating, I kind of felt like I was responsible for paying for stuff.
Etiquette wise.
Yeah, etiquette wise. But I don't think...
Because you were a guy dating girls.
Yes. And neither of us were like, we weren't working at the time.
Yeah.
We were in college. So it's not like we were doing expensive stuff.
It's funny. You're like, we'll come back to the etiquette piece in a minute. But your point about the age of like when we were dating back in college, it's like nobody had any money. The expectations were lower. It's actually a really important point because using my neighbor as an example, he's a grown man with a well-paying job and, he owns a home. He's got kids, right? Like the expectations when you're 40 something or late 30s, 40s dating someone and are a lot different when you're both in college. Right. And so I think I think that was like part of the point you were making too of like how much stuff would be different now anyways. And I even remember when I was dating my now husband, right? We were in our early to mid 30s at the time. And the expectations are a lot different of like what we go and do. I mean, we happen to be like fairly, we don't have a lot of high end expectations of going to like really fancy restaurants and stuff. But a lot of people do. And especially as you get older, right? Some of that exists even when you are in college, but it exists a lot more when you're in your like 30s and 40s. So I think the age is even a great point. And so, there's so many factors. Like we're not etiquette experts. We're not going to give you some perfect answer on etiquette, but I will say it was just a fascinating thing for me to even think about. And I think there's so many factors that play into what is appropriate. And to me, this is sort of like anything that's personal finance related. It's personal, right? So the factors in every dating situation are going to be unique and different and are going to impact what I believe is appropriate etiquette in a dating situation of like who pays and things like that. And I'll give you some examples, right? So it's timing, your gender can often play a role in terms of there's just stereotypical expectations, particularly in like male-female relationships that a male pays, which I'll talk about later. We can talk about it now, but like they're stereotypical. They don't need to, I wouldn't follow that personally, but people do, right? Like every time my neighbor was going out, like he was paying, right? And nobody was like, insisting that they pay. And so there's timing, gender, cultural and regional nuances of what is expected. There's financial situations, right? If it's a timing, by timing, I meant if it's early on in the relationship versus further into like a more established relationship. I think there's different expectations of who pays at that point. Also, sometimes there can be different expectations, like I said, with gender and heterosexual couples versus same-sex couples. Though in some of the conversations I've had with people, I think a lot of the considerations are the same, no matter, who's dating who. And, here's a little bit of what I'm going to mix, Mike, what I learned through talking to other people mixed in with some of my own opinions. And I think, the general point that I was making earlier, if you caught any of that somewhere in that context, I know Mike's like, are you going to take a breath? Is it just depends. And like the way I am, I would always, I'll give you some examples. It's so situational, right? And there isn't one etiquette that you could say up front. So in the thing of like financial situations, right? Like if I was going out with somebody who I knew was a teacher and I make way more money than a teacher makes, like I'd be even more insistent that I wanted to chip in or split it or pay or whatever. If I initiated it with somebody, I would feel more obligated to pay. Like that's one thing I heard from everybody is it depends who initiates the date, right? If somebody asks somebody else out, that often the person who initiated it would be expected, particularly like on a first date, would be expected to pay. But I also think, like, I'll give you an example. If I was on a date with someone and I was like, I'm never going out with this person again, super nice, but there's just not a fit here, I would be more likely to want to like offer to split the bill. I would feel bad having them pay for a meal, knowing that I don't ever plan to go out with this person again. Now, if they chose,
so you want to make it, transactional. Like, let me just buy you out.
I want to be
here.
like, yep, nothing is going to happen from here. So why don't I buy my way out of this relationship? But also, if that person, like the person who initiated it, chose a really expensive restaurant that I never would have gone to on my own, they're more than welcome to pay for me, right? If I was the one who initiated some expensive restaurant that I wanted to check out and it happened to be, you know what I mean? So I just think there's a lot that is very situational. And here's something that a friend of mine that I talked to told me also, and he is gay, so he's dating men, and so this is like, you know, coming from the perspective of a gay man, which again, I'm not sure that like there's that much difference, honestly, but I'm just, you know, caveating it. So he was saying that they usually split the bills, but he absolutely loves it when someone pays. And he said, and I think the other person does too. And so he was like, the baseline is we're going to split it. But he said, if you really want to flex and show that you're interested, you pay.
Ooh.
And I like that because that's kind of my point of like, he can show that he's interested, but if I don't accept it and I insist upon splitting it, I'm kind of sending a message, right? Versus his point was like, yeah. And if I kind of accept it, then I'm like, yeah, I'm going to let you pay. And I would say this to someone like, cool. I would be like, I always think it's polite to try to pay also, by the way, to like, you know, you could depend how insistent you get, but at least offer. And then if they're insisting that they want to buy it, I'd be like, okay, cool. I'll let you, but I'm going to get next time. And then there's like a little bit of I think there's going to be a next time.
This
That's my flirting voice. I think there's going to be a next time. Oh man,
dating you must have been uncomfortable at the beginning. So hearing you say that, it makes me realize that like I don't pick up on these signals, and I'm sure that there were all kinds of times in my dating life where somebody was like trying to tell me something, and I was just like, not getting it.
Well, it's so funny. I know when you were referencing like how long it had been since you had been dating and you were talking about Britta, I know how aligned you and Britta are financially, just that you're kind of similar people in your, you know, your level of natural frugality and other things. But when you said someone before Britta, I was picturing like, oh, was she the same? Like, did you ever date anyone that was like, you know, trying to buy like Gucci purses every day and like, had a different lifestyle?
Because it would have been when I was like 23. So,
well, there were some people like that at 23.
Guess. No, I think no, all of my dating experience prior to this would have been in college, and so I'm not. You know what, Maggie? I'm not a lot of help in this conversation. Honestly, it's been a long time. I had kind of a very specific time frame.
Well, here's the thing. I think it was fun to kind of like talk about etiquette for a minute, because I do think it is something to be thoughtful about when you are dating and to kind of go in thinking about. But look, it's like all things. There's no right or wrong answer, right? Do what feels right to you. Do what feels right to you. And again, I think, you know, be very situational. Like you don't have to have a hard and fast rule. Like, you know, again, just go with your gut and be fair and be kind and don't take advantage of other people financially. Either way, don't go suggesting expensive restaurants if you don't put that pressure on someone else, especially on a first date. And so I think, again, consider the etiquette, but I think we can move on to some tips and thoughts on how to deal with things as you are dating and spending money. Because I think there's a lot to be said for being able to turn what, like in these discussions with my neighbor, being able to turn what was becoming literally like thousands of dollars a month when you're going on dates with different people frequently, turning it into something that doesn't have to break the bank, right? So I think there's a lot of different tactics for how to deal with things. And then we'll get into some specific ideas for like what I'll call cheap dates.
The one thing that I would say for people who are, if you're listening to this podcast, obviously you care about personal finance, you care about frugality. And the thing that I think I was pretty true to my whole life and certainly feel very committed to now is that like, if you are dating somebody, or if you are friends with somebody and you're talking about having expenses for certain activities, like make sure that this type of behavior, these types of activities are true to yourself. Because if you're getting to know somebody and you go and buy something very expensive that you would never otherwise do, or go someplace that you would never otherwise go, they are getting to know the wrong you. And you want to make sure that as quickly as possible, you develop a true relationship with somebody. And so don't like fake it. And if that means they don't like you, so be it. It's not going to work out anyway.
I think that is a hugely important point, Mike. And we'll reinforce that later even. Like if any of these things that we talk about turn somebody off, you're welcome. You just saved yourself a lot of issues down the line, right? Like the good thing about dating is you can start early and you can find the right fit early on. So we'll get more into that in kind of some of our more specific tips on dating. But just some kind of thought starters here, right? Remember that a first date in particular, it's not yet a special occasion. You are literally getting to know someone, right? Like you can splurge on special occasions. Like I'm all for that. I don't think you need to splurge on first dates, right? Like I was asking some friends for advice around like etiquette and other things on this one time. And one of my friends, Shep, their quote was, "Don't blow your load on the first date," which I thought was kind of funny. They meant that in multiple different ways. Mm-hmm. But they were saying like, yeah, don't like, it isn't a special occasion. It's something, there's a lot of creative things you can do to make it special, but you don't need to splurge on a first date. You are just getting to know someone at that point. And this is not your like, wedding anniversary where you now know it's worth splurging,
And then be upfront with them. And so if you're starting to date and you're on a strict budget, like you should let them know that so that you kind of set the right expectations. And if that scares somebody off, then, it's not a good fit.
Yeah. I mean, we said this is kind of the point you were making earlier, Mike, but if any of the things that we're talking about being upfront about your budget or your financial reality or whatever, scares someone off, you dodged a bullet early on. And Anthony O'Neill has some like really funny clips online that I'll maybe put a link in the show notes to, that are just basically saying like, that you dodged a bullet, right? Mm-hmm. And be thankful versus being, annoyed by some situation or getting your feelings hurt or offended or anything. The other thing related to what you were just saying, Mike, is, I think you can, regardless of who you are in the relationship, whether, man, woman, what type of relationship, you can make it clear to the other person that you want to do something more simple and less expensive for that first hangout, right? And so, and you can do this in any more established relationship also, but definitely on the first date, like it takes a lot of pressure off the other person, especially stereotypically, depending on kind of like who you're dealing with, men versus women. Sometimes there's more pressure on the man. Like as a woman, like say, and again, I don't even like to put genders on this stuff, which is why I keep like caveating it. So this will be my final caveat. Doesn't matter what sex you are, right? Like either person can step up and say like, hey, let's do something simple. Let's do, and it takes the pressure off the other person. And again, if that doesn't fit with them, like you dodge something early on. But my neighbor who was taking some girls out on some very like expensive dates, because you go to a nice restaurant, you buy drinks, you get appetizers. Next thing you know, it's $200 easily. And then you realize and then he's like, yeah, I don't think we're going to go out again. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like that's ridiculous. I wouldn't even spend $200 with my spouse who I love and am committed to for the rest of my life. And so my neighbor told me a story about somebody that he actually is still dating right now. So I love the story because her suggestion of like their first meetup was that they could just grab coffee and like walk around a park. And she suggested that, which he was like, that's amazing. And for any Bachelor fans out there, it tells you that someone's, quote, there for the right reasons. You'll only understand that reference if you watch The Bachelor or Bachelorette.
Yeah,
Mike's like, doesn't know. And I mean, I just heard that from a friend. It's not like I watch it. But in all seriousness, like, I think someone really appreciates if you take the first step to lower the pressure, particularly in the early stages of dating, to say like, hey, like, let's just go do something chill.
Along those same lines, be considerate of the other person's financial situation. And if you don't know their financial situation, don't assume that they have a ton of money or are willing to spend a lot of money. That's kind of a high risk decision. It is easier just to do what, your friend said, was just meet up for something inexpensive and do a free activity.
Yeah. So on that note, Mike, let's shift into some actual tips for how to save money during the different stages of the dating process. Well, these are like meant to be very tactical, and we'll run through these. And we hope these give you some good ideas. And again, this is where I actually think these ideas are helpful for everybody, whether you're like dating new people and kind of out there in the dating scene, or whether you're, been married for 5, 10, 20 years and still want to, keep things fresh and like go on some proper dates, which I recommend for everyone, by the way. So the first tip, my best tip of all, Mike, were you familiar with this, by the way?
Fire dating?
Yeah.
No, never heard of it.
Okay. My best tip of all of how you want to save money while dating is date someone who believes in fire, because they're going to be frugal. I actually found a site, which we'll put a link in the show notes to, called Fire Dating. It claims to be the first ever dating website for people who are into financial independence. And of course, it's free. There's no sign-up. There's no cost, because that's in line with Fire. And it's not massive. I think I couldn't get that far in because I wasn't going to create an account, but I was just doing some research for the show in case my husband's listening.
Right.
And it had like people in my city. So, I mean, it might be a small grouping of people, but it was kind of cool. And look, that's not going to be for everybody. So let's get into some like tips that are more approachable for everybody, Mike.
One of the easiest things to do is just to Google like your city cheap dates. So there's a website for Atlanta cheap dates, and it gives you a guide to cheap or free entertainment in and around Atlanta. And so look for something similar. Even within like your township or city, there's going to be newsletters that you get with free activities all the time. These could be dates.
And like Atlanta Cheap Date, for example, they have a very active Instagram account. It's like good, fun ideas for, inexpensive things to do in our city. Another great way to save some money is to consider doing a FaceTime meeting first, right? You can call it a date, whatever you want. I know this is actually a lot more common now. I think COVID made this an acceptable and like common practice because so many people had to do this. I'm not sure if this was popular pre-COVID, but I know
wasn't popular when I was dating because iPhones didn't exist.
They didn't have FaceTime back then. Yep. But you can save a lot of money on this. Back to the point of you learn a lot in that first date, whether there's just chemistry, a lot of things. And so you don't need to spend, $50 or $200 on that first date to know if there's a vibe or connection with someone. Certainly there's things you'll learn when you're in person with someone, but you can learn like at least 50% of it through a FaceTime call. So do a FaceTime chat. Just say you like to, get to know someone first. If they're not willing to do that, there's a concern, right? Like that you're being, what's the term? Catfished or something. Look, there's it would raise a lot of red flags if somebody in this day and age, if somebody wasn't willing to hop on a FaceTime chat with me for 15 minutes before I meet a complete stranger in person. So suggest a FaceTime date. It can save a lot of money and a lot of time, honestly. You can save a lot of time and money on that one.
And once you've decided to meet up with this person in person, try to do something inexpensive and also that gives you a good exit strategy. So that I really like your story about wanting to meet for coffee and walking around the park, because you have a bunch of different exit strategies. When your coffee is done, you could leave. When you reach your exit of the park, you can leave.
I gotta go to the bathroom. This park doesn't have any bathrooms. That's too bad. See you later.
If your first date is a $200 dinner, I mean, that is expensive. You are stuck there for the entire time. I mean, that is a time commitment. It is a financial commitment. And so consider doing something easier and less expensive for your first in-person meeting.
After you're through these like first couple meetings, right? And even potentially in the first meeting, my biggest advice to people is get creative, right? There's so many cool things you can do to show your personality and keep things kind of fun and special while also saving money. And I love the term my friend used when I was asking him about this topic, where he was saying, if you really want to flex and show you're interested, you pay. I think if you really want to flex, you put some creativity and planning into something. Like anybody can just like take someone out to an expensive restaurant. But I think, and again, this is where you find someone that's the right match for you. But like for me, somebody that put a lot of thought into something and, like, for example, went to like a bougie grocery store or like got some, fun stuff from Trader Joe's or wherever and got some food and made a little picnic and like we went to a local park and thought ahead to like bring a blanket and bring glasses, like not one where like you look like you can't think through things because you forgot the forks or something. So think ahead. But you can get fun and creative with things. You could there's like a Buford Highway food tour where you can find examples. You can Google them online, but in Atlanta, there's just like all these amazing restaurants in this road called Buford Highway, and they're really inexpensive. But it's like an international food tour, right? And I've done those before. And it can be a really fun, creative way to just plan something that isn't super expensive, but that you put a lot of thought and creativity in and hopefully aligns with like something about that person, right? So if they're interested in astronomy, like plan something where you're like out at a park and you are looking at the stars, but you brought some snacks and champagne or something. And so there's so many ways that you can like have fun and get creative that also happen to save a lot of money because they're not like going out for some expensive dinner and drinks.
So consider looking for free activities, so free festivals, free concerts, because I mean, let's face it, when you go somewhere, there's stuff to spend money on and you will spend money. You're going to spend money on parking. You're going to need some food. There's going to be some other stuff. So if you go and pay for concert tickets and do something expensive, it's going to be the tickets plus all of your other stuff. And so if you start out with something free, that is an easy way to control your costs because you will incur costs. There's really no way to avoid it.
Another tip, Mike, is, and we're kind of progressively moving along here in the dating experience because I don't suggest this on your first date, is plan an at-home date night, right? So invite the person, and this is why, again, don't do it on your first date. Don't invite some stranger over to your house on a first date. But once you're comfortable and you trust someone and, all of that, invite someone over, offer to cook for them, order in takeout, plan, like be thoughtful about a movie that you guys are going to watch. Isn't that what they call like Netflix and chill? Which I learned was not just chilling. I think my kids actually had to teach me that. But there, you can do a lot in terms of like inviting someone over and, it's a great way to save some money on a date.
The next item is don't be afraid to whip out a coupon on a date, which I would actually be a little afraid to whip out a coupon on a date.
Really?
So here's the thing.
I didn't think you would, Mike. I thought this was like totally your jam.
Well, I mean, after like 3 dates when somebody was clear that like this was my lifestyle, I think it would be fine. But early on, like first date, I would definitely not do this.
I have a funny story about my neighbor, the same neighbor. We were like, he was dating someone else at the time, but we were going out with some neighbors and he had suggested this place that we can walk to in our neighborhood. And I think it was once we got there, or maybe when we were walking on the way, he was like joking that he had a coupon. We always get like coops. I used to call them coops sometimes. And it's like coupon or coupon, but that's a whole nother topic. He was joking. So the whole time it just became this joke all night that he had a coop and that's why we were going there. And like, we were just joking at like what a high roller he is because he was like, he was, when they were ordering, he was like, oh, I got a coop for a free appetizer. So he was like, whatever you want. But it's like, you can turn it into kind of like, a playful, funny thing of like, and again, if they don't think that's funny and they're worried that like you brought a coupon for a free appetizer, and again, maybe not on the first date, but still like, it's probably a sign.
Yeah.
And I think we've said this, a million times, but if they are bothered by any of these approaches, it may not be the right person for you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the good thing about dating when you're older, is that we've talked about this when we talk about like having money conversations in relationships. Like many people are in long-term committed relationships and they're already with who they're with and they're struggling to talk about money. When you're dating, you can talk about money early on, right? And you can make it a conversation point because you're having conversations about it related to even the dating process. And like, that's okay. And if that person is uncomfortable talking about it and not willing to open up, like, again, it could be a potential early red flag to you that, it's just not the right fit or it's not who you want to potentially spend the rest of your life with.
And one final tip, avoid these stereotypical gifts for people. So flowers, chocolates, jewelry, that sort of stuff early on. Not only is it overpriced, but it doesn't really say a lot about you. You may run the risk of offending somebody because they don't want you to waste your money on flowers, but it just doesn't add a lot to the relationship. And so from our perspective as frugal people, this is just a category you should really never jump into.
Yeah. And back to the like, get creative, like Valentine's Day is around the corner. Do something different, right? Like everybody does flowers and chocolate. And also like, oh my gosh, Mike, I have like an angry feeling about flower delivery.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone I've ever dated quickly learns this
learned.
about me.
Immediately
My husband sent me flowers once that were delivered, and I was like, please don't ever do. I think I had to like first be like, I meant to say thank you, but please don't ever do that again. He knows that he is allowed to buy me flowers and bring them to our house, but not pay someone else to deliver them. There is a insane markup on flower delivery that is just for something that's going to like die in 5 days, right? I don't mind fresh flowers. I think they're beautiful, but it's something where it like upsets me when someone spends money on that. It is just like it's not my love language. But again, we should did we do an episode on love languages?
Yeah,
we talked about it.
Yeah, we did.
Okay, I'll put it in the show notes because I just thought of it as we were talking. So we'll put a link to the love languages episode, which I don't even remember if we did it as a separate episode or what, but we'll figure it out. Because I was going to joke that's not my love language. That's another way. Another final tip that's off the cuff is get the person, especially if you're a few dates in, like get them to do the love languages test quiz online. It's a free quiz. And you very quickly see if their love language is gifts or if it's acts of affirmation or words of affirmation or acts of service. And then that like someone would very quickly see that I don't want a lot of gifts. I would rather have acts of service and words of affirmation. And you can save a lot of money by understanding, and not just a lot of money, but like a lot of time, and be able to better communicate with whoever you're dating if you understand their love languages. So maybe that's our final tip, Mike.
So Maggie, I hesitate to ask you this because we don't have like an hour left on this episode, but can you briefly tell us what was your most memorable early date? So not yet in a serious committed relationship.
Oh my gosh. That is honestly a tough question. Could you answer that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, well then because sometimes when people have questions, they have a good answer. So I'm just going to reverse it on you while I think.
Okay.
If I can even remember.
Britta and I met at the University of Miami in Florida. And so fairly early on, I don't remember how early on, but this would have been like within a month of us dating. I told her I wanted to take her somewhere special for dinner. And my plan was to drive from Miami down to Isla Mirada, which is one of the Keys. And it was like an hour and a half drive or something like that. Hour drive, I can't remember. It takes you through like a weird part of Miami as you go down the highway towards the Keys. And so I was driving her down, and as we were in like the weirdest looking part of Miami, I was like, it should be like right around here, like one of these streets. And she was thinking like, this guy's kidnapping me. But then we made it down to the Keys and she understood where we were going. And we had dinner at a restaurant that we ended up going to a bunch of times because we really loved it. In Isla Mirada, it was overlooking the ocean, like the sun was setting, it was outside, we walked around, had a great meal. And like we still to this day talk about it because like
how early on was that? Like
a few weeks.
Okay.
But like, this was one of those things where like she understood my sense of humor. She trusted me. And so even though like it was like made her nervous, like she still laughs about it today that I was like teasing her about where we were going. She's like, I cannot believe this guy's going to take me to a restaurant in this area where I think I'm going to die. But then it turned out to just be the most beautiful evening. And we ended up doing it a bunch of times.
That sounds lovely. When was the last time you guys went back there?
Not since we left Miami,
okay.
Like a year and a half later.
Well, while you were sharing that and I was listening, I did think of, honestly, like one of my most memorable dates was actually our first date. We just had a really good time and we had talked online, we had talked like on the phone many times leading up to that. So we had already gotten to know each other a good bit, but it was like a really good memorable. I mean, it was in downtown Decatur. I remember like we were going to go to this restaurant. It was a good example of like how Greg is too. Very thoughtful, but sometimes like misses certain details. And I mean that in the most loving way because he was taking me to this restaurant. We weren't vegan at the time. And I knew this place really well. He wasn't as familiar with downtown Decatur as I was because it was near where I lived, not near where he lived. And he didn't make a reservation. And the second he said we were going there, I was like, I don't know if I asked or slowly realized that he didn't have a reservation, but I was like, dude, we're not going to be able to eat there without a reservation. So we need a backup plan. And I'm so forward. I'm like, he's like telling me. And I think I might have asked, like, do we have a reservation just to know what time we were supposed to be there? And when he said we don't, I was like, well, let's give it a shot, but we're probably not going to be eating there tonight. And he was kind of like, oh yeah, I had no idea you needed a reservation here. And I was like, yeah, some fancy stuff in downtown Decatur. But we like went to this place that at the time was called Paper Plane. Now it's like SOS Tiki Bar. And like we went there afterwards and we just had a really nice night. And it was just a fun night. And then the other thing is we went to the Shaky Knees concert, which is like a music festival in Atlanta. It was not a free event, but and that was a couple months into dating. And we just had like a really good time at it. And we were like, it was just fun. It was like one of the first kind of like fun. We were both drinking. We were just like really great live music. And we made a lot of memories that night. So it was a fun night. I forgot the question.
What was your most memorable early date? Those are good. Those are two good ones. All right, Maggie.
Okay. Top 3 takeaways.
Let's do it. Number 1, be true to yourself and don't plan dates that contradict who you really are. They're probably going to be expensive and it's not going to help that person understand who you are.
Yeah. And look, if you are really, if you into fancy stuff, like that's okay. We're talking about us here. So,
right.
Number 2, get creative, right? Like you can go through the process of dating lots of different people and getting out there in the dating world or back out there in the dating world. And you can, to use my friend's term, you can quote flex without spending massive amounts of money, right? By being creative and thoughtful and doing a little bit of research in advance.
And lastly, number 3, remember, if the person you are dating is bothered by any of these approaches, then they're probably not the right person for you, and that's okay.
Yeah. And you found that out early on. So just be thankful and, get back. It was the phrase like, get back in the saddle again, dust yourself off and get back on that horse. I don't know why I'm thinking about riding a horse. Okay. On that note, let's wrap this up.
All right. Thanks everybody for listening. If you've been challenged or inspired by what you've heard, please rate and review the show. You can also subscribe to make sure you never miss an episode.
If you have any thoughts or questions, we always love to hear from you, and you can leave us a voicemail or text us at 404-981-3370, or you can also hit us up on Instagram.
All right. Thanks, Maggie. This was fun.
Okay. Good luck out there to everyone in the dating world.
All right. Bye.
Bye, Mike.